So I'm Dana Jane.
I am Fran Rodriguez.
My name is Susan Knoll.
My name is Jeb Musser.
So I'm Dana Jane, or Dana Killmeyer Jane. Sometimes I use Dana Killmeyer as my writing name. I'm a published author and educator and community learning facilitator. Currently I work at Pennsylvania College of Art and Design as a student success advisor, helping students navigate barriers and access resources. More broadly in the community, at the micro level, working here like in Lancaster, directly on Prince Street with the Neighbors Community Center, teaching English to refugees and immigrants, and as well as cultural immersion experiences. I'm part of a collective of mental health practitioners and somatic movement practitioners, also here in Lancaster, as a community care circle.
I am happy to be here with you today. I am Fran Rodriguez, and I'm a senior program officer with the Lancaster County Community Foundation. I've been here for 12 years, and I can tell you that my role has evolved, but I feel brand new in terms of the work that I do with people. What brings me joy about this role is the fact that I get to represent a team that is accountable for the resources and funds of other people that's serving the greater Lancaster County map. And my main role here is to oversee a dynamic, unique 18-month program called the Baldwin Leadership Program.
My name is Susan Knoll. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Chief Mission Officer at YWCA Lancaster. So I oversee our Center for Racial and Gender Equity. I oversee our housing program, which is called the Mary Kepler Housing Program. And then I also oversee our Sexual Assault Prevention and Counseling Center. And just making sure that all those programs run smoothly and we effectively offer services to the community, and most importantly, that our mission is promoted, which is to eliminate racism, empower women, and then promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all.
My name is Jeb Musser. I'm the Vice President of Land Protection at Lancaster Farmland Trust. And I oversee basically all of our programs at Lancaster Farmland Trust. So we are a nonprofit organization that focuses on farmland preservation work. So landowners who wish to keep their farms as farms, there's a legal deed restriction process that takes place there. So working through landowners on those transactions. And then once a farm is preserved, we then work with those same landowners on improving their conservation practices on their farms. So making sure they're handling their manure properly if it's a dairy farm, or their soil health or water quality projects on their farms. And so I have a staff of 6 folks that help me with that.
I mentioned in my last comment about learning across difference, and that has been such an energizing aspect for my work in general. I think in the climate that we live in today, and being curious about what other people think and their perspectives and how they do things, and I think that's such a ripe area for learning and growth in general. And that for me is like growing, my growth edge, like where can I have some familiarity or interest, but continue to grow and explore further.
It was mostly to give back, because this was the place that answered the knock at the door. I had been asking for funding from different sources to study where Latinos lived and worked in Lancaster. This was back in 2005, and I thought it was important, but not everyone really understood how doing a study of Latinos would actually benefit how they do their work. And the Community Foundation said yes. And that was probably when a whole lot of things began for me and the people that I work with. So after they said yes, I wanted to give back to them. And so I started volunteering as a grant reviewer, something I'd never done before. Pero there weren't Latinos doing that back then. I don't know why. And so I became a grant reviewer, and then I got more involved in the work that the Community Foundation was doing then, and they created a position for me, and I came on board, and I've been here ever since.
Well, I'm a social worker. I've been a social worker since I was 21, so for a long time, almost 30 years, and I was drawn to social work just because of the way that it tries to get at oppression and systemic issues as a way of like liberating people and ensuring that they can meet their potential. I've always cared about social justice. I don't know why. I just have been, from the time I was young, if I saw something that wasn't right or something that was wrong, I was not the kind of person that could just see it and then not unsee it, and then I felt like a huge responsibility to do something about it, and I don't know why. Like, who knows where those instincts come from? I just know that I've always had it. So when I was trying to look for a profession that kind of matched my passions and who I was as a person, I first started off as I was going to do Spanish because I really loved Latin American culture. I loved speaking Spanish, traveling in Latin America, living in Latin America. Then I quickly realized that my options would be probably to teach or to work in an educational setting. And then I decided to look more into social work. I don't know where social work came from, but it just kind of like appeared one day, and I saw that it had a more social justice focus. So I was like, oh my gosh, I can still continue my work with people from all backgrounds and using my Spanish language skills and English, and I can also work at some of the justice issues that I was always passionate about. So it's like social work just kind of fell into my lap. And I've always worked with children and families, and that's what brought me to this work. And then I've mostly worked in educational settings, but just from a different, not just from a language focused perspective, but just helping families and helping children who were experiencing just a lot of barriers due to systemic issues. So when I saw this job come open, I was really excited about it because it was kind of like a culmination of a lot of the work I had done previously as a social worker. And it kind of combined all my interests in feminism, empowering women, also anti-racism work. So it seemed like the perfect fit. So I'm really lucky. I feel lucky to have found this position. It's one of the reasons why I took this position, is because I don't know any other organizations that explicitly state eliminating racism and empowering women, and the intersectionality of those two issues in their mission and in what they do as an organization.
Yeah, I actually started at Lancaster Farmland Trust right out of college. So I was an intern. I was a student at Millersville, studying geography, doing a lot of work on geographic information systems, which is like computer mapping work and those sort of things, and landed me an internship at Lancaster Farmland Trust. And then after I graduated, they had a full-time opening, and have been there since. So haven't really done anything else.
Yeah, but back in Lancaster, just, wherever I can find opportunities to get involved, I find it so energizing. And I also feel like I need to mention this, I've only been living in Lancaster for a year and a half. So I kind of, I want to honor, like, I don't know, like, I'm not a local, I didn't grow up here, and there's so much for me to learn, and that's one of the reasons that I do engage with community projects and initiatives as a way for me to learn directly from others, as well as to contribute and give back. And because am not a local, I can bring a fresh perspective that sometimes those who grew up in a place don't have.
I'm a disruptor. And I feel that in your life, if you follow the rules all the time, what are you really contributing to life? For yourself and for other people, right? As a single mom, I constantly had to advocate for my daughter. And that really matched well with what I do here as I advocate for our community, as well as the nonprofits that may have it together, they know what they're doing, or they're so small and they need help with navigating resources. I also champion Black, Brown, and Indigenous people in our community to get involved because we need to take up space. And I like creating ripples. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think from a young age, I think I've always been not interested, but just like noticing how, especially racism works in our community. So I was raised in a mostly like all white community. We had a very large Mexican population in the town I was from in Michigan. And I remember noticing from just a very young age how a lot of people in my community would speak like disparagingly about people who were not white, and not really having like a word to put on that experience of what we know as racism. And then, so I was always like thinking about those things and wondering why this is how people are. Like, why are we saying these things? And then as I grew up, having experiences, I lived in a couple of countries where the disparities were like even greater, like more than I had even experienced. And I was like, I think I realized being like somebody who was white in a predominantly like Latino country, what it was like to not be part of like the quote unquote dominant culture and how isolating that was. So I started to realize like if you don't start getting at like the systems that are behind what's causing the need for social work to exist in the first place. I mean, not that I want social work to like completely dissolve as a profession, but it was like, we have to start getting at these systemic things. So I approach my work now with a systemic lens, and I think it's being more of like a leader in the nonprofit world. Like you can impact more of like macro level issues. So I approach it with a more systemic lens at this point in my career.
I did not grow up on a farm. I grew up helping out on a farm a few years in my teenage years, but definitely did not come from a farm family. Grew up in suburbia, basically. But I think I gained an appreciation for farming, just sort of growing up in central Pennsylvania, doing that little bit of farm labor over those years. It's all around you. Yeah. But I think it helps me, I think not having an ag background helps me come at it from a level of curiosity and not making assumptions about what farmers might need or don't need or what might be playing into certain decisions that they're making, because my family has never had to make those types of decisions because we don't have a farm. So I think that's benefited me somewhat, that level of sort of naivety towards the process, I would say, and it's helped gain some trust, I would say. Yeah.
I also, think of community. So at the place-based, often when we think of community, we're thinking about like our place where we live, our neighborhood. I also carry within the definition of community living in digital worlds, how our communities often aren't where we live physically or geographically. I'm engaged in communities in East Africa, working with organizations there that are carrying initiatives for inclusive education, regenerative agriculture and economic systems, and like trauma-informed social development. And we'll be going there this summer to do some work with inclusive community for 3 weeks in Rwanda to get more experience of like having that immersive, hands-on, like relational experience, which I feel is so important to community work. There's an organization that I also work with, the Circle Legacy, and they carry on Native American traditions and help to empower and educate people about the Native American people that called the Susquehanna home and continue to live here today. Looking for ways that we can support and empower one another, because many mental health providers and alternative healing practitioners tend to work alone and carry a lot of emotional baggage and emotional labor with the communities and individuals that they work with. So that group is on one side a support group for one another, and also a collective looking on how we can support the community and use our gifts and talents to provide mental health support to other mental health providers.
So what we do really well is convene groups, create platforms for groups to do what they do best. We have a set of values that I feel are within every sector of our community, be it faith, education, business, and the nonprofit world. And I believe that nonprofits in Lancaster and beyond, they're watching what we do so that they can rally around the opportunity, but also kind of do the same. And that's a big responsibility to have in a community. When you think about accountability and trend setting, I know in the fashion industry, they change up all the time. But when you're talking about a charitable organization that holds $260 million to champion what community is, it's a huge lift, and we take it seriously. We work hard, but we also play hard. We have our hand, we have the pulse of the community represented on the board, but also on our team. And whenever there's a current issue that's affecting Lancaster County as a whole, that's the place where we devote attention to. I feel like Extra Give has become a staple because it's not about us, it's about all of the nonprofits that participate. We create a place for them to do the fundraising. And then we have a big party at the end of the night after the 24 hours. And to me, that is like the most unconditional way of loving, which is philanthropy. It's love, but in a giving way. And that happens every November. It is almost like the pre-Thanksgiving party, where all of Lancaster County becomes alive with dreaming and hoping for a better Lancaster. In all of the nonprofits that compete, or it's not a competition actually, it's raising money for themselves. Yeah. And my main role here is to oversee a dynamic, unique 18-month program called the Baldwin Leadership Program. And it is a competitive grant opportunity of $5,000. People who work at nonprofits, they compete for it. And essentially, they get to write about something that they wish for themselves, a personal leadership endeavor. Between 7 and 10 people are selected, and I curate an 18-month timeline where we get together and we learn new things. I feel like affordable housing has definitely been a thorn in the community, and we have made it a point to partner with the larger organizations that deal with fair housing issues and help the most vulnerable people in the community. We don't have the answers to everything. We're not experts at everything. What we can do, again, is convene people and partner with others who are doing what's best for the residents of Lancaster. So our tagline, you'll notice, and on our website and other places, is that we embolden extraordinary community. And that comes by way of not only having grants for organizations to apply for, but also scholarships for students to really take advantage of. And we elevate the stories of our community in a really special way. Instead of like using, stock photos in any of our material or on our website, we do the storytelling by way of real people in the community that have benefited or have really taken a chance to work with philanthropy, trust philanthropy, and make it work for them, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you can ask anyone and you'll probably come up with different answers from our entire team, but whatever our community is facing, we also put ourselves in that circle of understanding, so that we don't just come up with things for the sake of, coming up with things.
Well, I know, you mentioned this earlier, but right now we're just seeing so many setbacks in things that were considered progress, especially around women's rights and especially around, so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. So I see our role, if our mission is to empower women and to eliminate racism and promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all, as really proudly stating our mission and not shying away from letting people know that we are not scared of this mission. It is what we have always been here for. So if nothing else, I think it's being an organization in the community that still is saying, yes, racism is a problem. Yes, patriarchy is a problem, and we're here. We're not going to shy away from our mission at all. And I know for me, when I started working at the YWCA, it was, it was just like you had said, like refreshing to see like somebody's actually still saying these words out loud. And I think we still need those people out there to say like, yes, racism is a public health crisis. And yes, we have to do something about it. And yes, women still do not have our full rights to be ourselves. And a lot of people don't. And we're going to be here to make sure that people can live into their potential, be who they want to be, love who they want to love. And everybody has access to the resources that they need. Yeah, I mean, we've got a few, like we've done our Race Against Racism for 27 years, and it's the largest one in the country. And we've raised hundreds of $1,000s throughout the years here in Lancaster County, which in Lancaster County is a pretty big deal that we still have thousands of people coming out every year to run this race that is explicitly against racism. So I think that that's a huge accomplishment. People come from beyond Lancaster to come and run the race and support our mission. So that's a huge accomplishment. We also released the racial equity profile a few years ago, which was the first of its kind that looks at equity factors in Lancaster County, but specifically from a racial lens. So I would say that the racial equity profile, the Race Against Racism are probably our two most recent accomplishments, aside from all the other programs that we offer. So we looked at health indicators around health, education, criminal justice, and specifically how those issues interact with race. So that was pretty groundbreaking because people actually got to put numbers to the things that they might have been seeing or feeling or wondering about, but then it actually said, yes, these disparities do exist. Yes, Black children are suspended at this much higher rate than white students. And yes, Black residents are arrested at this much higher rate than their white counterparts. And then from that, we've been able to kind of tackle some of those indicators. So right now we have a racial equity action profile group that is looking at bail reform specifically and how members of the Black and brown community here are disproportionately given very high bail rates that are often arbitrary, and trying to work with our local magistrates and justices to say, like, there has to be a rhyme or reason. This just can't be coming out of nowhere, and it's disproportionately impacting Black and brown residents in Lancaster County. So how can we make this so that that's not the case? We are not scared of this mission. It is what we have always been here for. So if nothing else, I think it's being an organization in the community that still is saying, yes, racism is a problem. Yes, patriarchy is a problem, and we're here. We're not going to shy away from our mission at all. And I know for me, when I started working at the YWCA, it was, it was just like you had said, like refreshing to see like somebody's actually still saying these words out loud. And I think we still need those people out there to say, like, yes, racism is a public health crisis, and yes, we have to do something about it. And yes, women still do not have our full rights to be ourselves. And a lot of people don't. And we're going to be here to make sure that people can live into their potential, be who they want to be, love who they want to love, and everybody has access to the resources that they need.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, similar to other counties around us, Lancaster County is a very ag-heavy county. There's a lot of folks that choose to live and work here because of farming. It has it plays a role in sort of people's quality of life and their health and those sort of things, being around sort of open spaces and fresh local produce and those sort of things. Even if you're living in one of the boroughs or Lancaster City, you're still no more than 5 or 10 minutes away from a farm or a farm stand at any given time if you want to go source food locally. We also play a role in sort of development occurring in Lancaster County. You know, our organization is not anti-development. Yes, we are preserving farms, but we understand that development and growth, whether it be housing or commercial development, those sort of things, has to happen somewhere. We just are the ag voice in that conversation, saying that, well, before we think about developing that farm over there, what about sort of infilling some of these other areas that maybe are old industrial land that we're not using anymore, and sort of thinking a little smarter about growth. And so we try to fill that. We definitely don't, we're not the quote unquote stand in front of the bulldozer kind of organization where, you know, if there's a small farm field somewhere that's surrounded by growth that makes sense to be developed, we're not against that necessarily. But out in the middle of farm country where it's all surrounded by agriculture, we shouldn't have housing development out there, basically. So that's the role we play. You know, we're really not farmers per se. We're more conservationists, I would say, more so than farmers. But yeah. So that's, it's an interesting, we're in an interesting position right now. I think we've been around for 40 years, and historically we basically have worked with farmers and folks that come from an ag background or have lived here their whole lives around farms and understand and support our mission. But our supporters are growing older, and they're growing less and less connected to the work that we do. And the younger families and younger sort of generations living in Lancaster County don't have quite that connection to agriculture that we all did 2 or 3 or 4 generations ago when our families all had farms basically years ago. And we are not a land trust that has the ability to have folks out on properties that we own or anything like that. Think about like the Lancaster Conservancy, which is another land trust in Lancaster County, but they focus on wooded lands with preserves and trails and those sort of things. So folks can come out and engage with their mission by coming out and hiking on a trail. We don't have that ability. We preserve land that's all privately owned. So given that and the fact that we want the community to be more aware of the issues that surround agriculture, we've really leaned into sort of this community engagement piece a little bit, and how can we connect with other community organizations to sort of fill that void. So we would like to eventually have a farm that we own and operate that could be a community space for other community organizations to come out and utilize, or school groups to come out and sort of learn about agriculture. You know, there's a lot of folks that unfortunately that connection between where their food comes from is a little lost. They're just going to the grocery store and picking out what's there, and it's always there. But there's not that connection about if all this agriculture around us goes away, those food systems get broken as well. So rather, we're getting away from sort of operating on our little island in agriculture and understand that it's all connected here, whether it be through school group education or those sort of development projects we talked about. We play a role sort of in all of that, I would say. We've had, I'd say in the past 5 years, we've had a couple of key farms that we've preserved through what we really call our preserve and conserve concept. So these are farms where not only did the landowners want to preserve their farms in perpetuity for future generations to be able to farm them, but at the same time, they also wanted to conserve their resources on those farms, meaning they were willing to preserve their farm with Lancaster Farmland Trust, but then also allowed us to work with them to install a number of conservation practices on their farms. So things like planting streams along the creek, for a riparian forest buffer, building a sort of stabilized heavy use area for cattle that's roofed and keeps sort of the soil and the water clean and in place. So it's this preserve and conserve concept. It's, let's not just preserve the land and let it set. Let's preserve it and enhance it so that the farms that are going to be here in perpetuity are performing at the highest environmental standard possible. Boy, the biggest issue, there's a lot of them, but I would say One of the biggest ones that comes to mind are land prices in Lancaster County are just so astronomically expensive. I mean, we all know there's a housing shortage, and we know there's a land shortage sort of generally across the nation. But, in Lancaster County, farmland in and of itself is so valuable. That young and beginning farmers have a really tough time sort of affording to buy a farm of their own. So they're relying on help from families, or they're up to their eyeballs in debt with the bank, or those sort of things. So that's definitely one challenge. Certainly, global markets and politics and all those sort of things, farmers are subject to those things too when it comes to global trade, and tariffs and all those sort of things impact sort of the price of feed and fertilizer and milk prices and all those sort of things. So they're definitely not insulated from that. And I would certainly say, farmers are resilient when it comes to things like changing weather patterns and those sort of things. They'll change their operations to be able to address that. So, but that's of course a challenge as well. So. I would say, I think what we do supports everyone, really, from an aspect of we all need to eat, we all need a place to live, we all need, sort of access to clean, clear water around us. So I would say that our part, at times, feels a little obvious, but at times that's important for us to sort of mention that to folks is like, we need farms in order to eat. And, we all like to be able to go out and do a hike in the countryside, or ride our bikes in the countryside, wherever it is, drive around and be able to look at sort of those beautiful scenic view sheds that farms and ag land can provide. But certainly, food and clean water is probably the key ways that we provide support to the community, I would say.
I think in general, centering young voices and centering the environment is where we need to start looking at meaningful change. So it's well-resourced, it composts waste and recycles waste rather than just trying to dismiss it or, throw the baby out with the bathwater and start all over, but something that takes what is currently existing and recognizes the strengths and the values of that and how to transform it into something that is more living and relevant to what's needed now. So I think, also young people's voices of all ages, caregivers, those who are in care work and directly connected with those who are vulnerable and marginalized, and people who are vulnerable and marginalized. There's a statistic or idea going around that Lancaster has the largest immigrant population. So, also with what is going on currently at the national level, I think it's important to hear from immigrants or refugees who are living here, and to, integrate their lived experiences into how Lancaster continues to grow and evolve. I would love to see more regenerative projects, both with gardening, with economics, with leadership. For me, regenerative and sustainability starts with inner practice. And I think of the work that I do in building community and just in general, I tend to think of it at the micro, middle, and macro level. And that can be framed in a lot of different ways, both the work I do here in Lancaster, the work I do at the national level, and the work I do internationally, and always trying to hold one or the other. I feel really claustrophobic and isolated if I only focus and had all of my attention in Lancaster, or if I was doing a lot of international work and didn't have a solid ground in a geographical location. But also the micro level is starting with myself. And so knowing that any change I want to affect is going to start with me and how I'm showing up, and rooted and centered in that process, and then also that I'm available and receptive and responsive to how that change is going to evolve and that it's going to irrevocably change me as a person.
Had you asked me that question about what meaningful change looks like 5 years ago, I probably would have answered with some, buzzwordy kind of way. But today, it means inviting youth and young adults to the table when decisions are being made. Because we are missing the boat. We're missing the solutions when kids are not at the table expressing themselves. They have so much to share, and yet they're hardly ever at a table. So to me, that's what it means.
I think meaningful change is people being able, we talk about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So like you can't, at least in social work we do, which is like people are always going to be trying to meet their need for safety, like basic safety first and foremost. And you can't reach the next level of self-realization until you meet those things. And then you can start pursuing like your interests in school and passions. And then once you get that, then you can pursue your dreams and all these. So I feel like for me, meaningful change would be moving people out of that safety and security, which I feel like way too many are still living at that level. People should be able to start pursuing the things that they want to pursue, should be able to buy homes for their families or themselves, should be able to love the people that they want to love without having to fear discrimination. Like I think that a Lancaster County, the change that I would like to see is just people being able to live freely and being able to have agency to make the choices that they want to make. And I think pursue happiness so we can all kind of self-actualize.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say from the development and housing side and industry side, I would say meaningful change is sort of back to my response for a couple of questions ago is we can't be anti-change. We can't say no development can occur anywhere. We have to allow for development to occur somewhere, but let's think through it and do it in the places where it makes the most sense, where we're not impacting our highest quality farmland, where we're not impacting our waterways and those sort of things. Let's try to infill so we don't have these abandoned properties, places that aren't being used for anything. So I think that it's okay to change. It's okay to have new industries come into the area, and certainly we don't want to say Lancaster's closed. No one else can move here, but we just need to be thoughtful about that growth.
Young people,
Youth and young adults.
Our young people.
Younger generation.
yeah. I mean, I don't know the statistics on this, but I walk to and from campus, and I see a lot of young people. We have several colleges and universities around here, so young people meaning young adults, but also I cross through the park and I see a lot of families and young kids, and that gives me a lot of hope to see kids outside playing, parents encouraging their kids to be outside playing, engaging with the environment, engaging with other kids, engaging with intergenerationally. I feel like that is encouraged and valued here in Lancaster. One of the things that attracted me to PCAD before I started working here several years earlier, we're promoting their creative Center for Creative Exploration programs as offering intergenerational workshops and programs. I think that's really, really important. The diversity of appearance, of thought, self-expression. Again, it's a small, vibrant city. So it's a place where you can experiment and put yourself out there and be bold and, get established as an artist, leader, business owner. the cultural, I mean, just I guess the culture too. It's just a really rich, unique culture. I've lived a lot of different places, including Minneapolis and Las Vegas and Pittsburgh, places that have very distinct cultures, and that's something that I feel like I'm always attracted to in a place. And since living out in like central eastern PA, I feel like Lancaster has the most really original, unique culture and such a weaving together of different cultures that are able to maintain their distinctness while also like celebrating one another.
Kids. Yeah, I think as an elder, as a boomer, I am really revisiting this idea of being a kid again, thinking in terms of the what ifs, trying to like stay out of what other adults in my circle are talking about. I want to be down, where the kids are and listen to what they have to say. I'm so inspired and thankful that I've been surrounded by millennials who want to share with me, but I am learning so much from as well. Maybe that's where I get the whole idea of being, young again and exploring, having fun in different ways. Yeah. I recently visited Puerto Rico and went to 3 beaches, and I was like a little kid in the sand looking for the most beautiful shells that I'd never seen before. I mean, you'd think that I've never been to a beach, but it was so fascinating just to be still, be quiet, and be one with nature.
Our young people, I have the privilege of like just interacting, just having a child myself and like, interacting with all of his friends. And then I've worked in local college systems. I think whenever I interact with like people who are a lot younger than me, that gives me hope because they are full of fire, they are full of passion. Also, they are very smart and they see exactly what's going on around them. They're way more awakened than I would say a lot of people in my generation or the generation before me are. So I feel like what gives me hope is like seeing young people out like in the streets, protesting, saying that they're going to vote because they do not agree with what's happening around them. I don't think we give them enough credit. They have great ideas. They are visionaries. So I think it's just the younger generation.
I think Lancaster is such a unique place because you have such interesting dynamic of people in Lancaster City and obviously Lancaster County as a whole. You have sort of a very robust, dynamic city, downtown, and even some of the boroughs, have some of that sort of diversity of businesses and people and communities and backgrounds and those sort of things. But then you still are surrounded by a relatively intact natural and agricultural areas, and so at times you can have some conflict there. But I also think it's sort of what's beautiful about Lancaster in a lot of ways is you have a lot of different mindsets and a lot of different views on things, and I think there's sort of a place for everyone in Lancaster in certain areas, and that's what it certainly has attracted me and my family to live here and work here and stay here and those sort of things. You don't have that other places. Obviously, some areas you have really robust downtown cities with no sort of natural or open space areas, and then you have the opposite where you're out in farm country and there's it takes you an hour to get to the grocery store. This provides a nice balance, I would say. But I think there is an appetite, especially through the younger generation, maybe through the sort of through the environmental lens. There's an interest in agriculture and there more and more folks are interested in being able to grow their own food and learning about those sort of things. So I think leaning into that is a beneficial thing, and trying to work together on that piece. I think more folks are interested in it, so let's not push them away.
I would tell the change makers of tomorrow to be patient, be present, participate, get to know what's already happening in your community and ecosystem before launching, to build connections and understanding of what's existing, and what you can do that's really going to be unique to you, and contributing to the greater whole. Yeah. You don't have to look far, I think, to find opportunities, whether it's to work with, refugee, immigrant population, youth, gardens, agriculture, people reintegrating after incarceration. I think the smallness of it, it's a place where it's safe enough to take risks, and kind of put yourself out there, grow into, if you're ambitious and curious, to grow into your dreams and ambition, and cultivate a community that can support you in that. We also have Westart, which is a great community center. Lots of, just out of the service-centered heritage that we have here.
I would want my message to anyone that is misinformed, confused about what a foundation and philanthropy means. It belongs to us, the people. It's not just for the rich and wealthy. It is for the average person that wants to have a say about how funding is used, but also wants to create a legacy for their own family. They can start a fund with a foundation. And it's something that I'm trying my hardest while I'm still here to encourage other people, our people, to consider, because this is ours.
I would say to the young person, you may think that your voice doesn't matter, and I know that life gets really consuming, but you have to pay attention to what's going on around you, and you have to vote, because everything that we do, everything that we buy, every school that we go to, our ability to go to college is determined by laws and policies, and there are human beings behind those policies, and humans listen to other humans. So I want that person to know that they can have an impact. It actually isn't that hard to organize a group of people. I think they say that 3.5% of the population has to be activated in order for change to happen. So I guess my message to a younger person was, you do have a responsibility to everybody to help and care for your fellow human beings, so don't ever forget that. And also, you have power, because I think the systems that be want us to think that we don't have power, but it's actually shockingly, I think, easy to impact change. And so I just want them to, no matter what they do, try to make this world a better place for everybody, That would be my message.
I would say, if assuming that you're someone who lives or works or both in Lancaster County, agriculture is such a huge component of that. You might have a nice view shed of a farm off your back porch or off your neighborhood, or you might be able to drive down to your favorite farm stand in the middle of August and buy apples or whatever you're getting there. You just don't have that a lot of other places. You have sort of access to this fresh local produce. And this sort of open space that is what's driving a lot of people here. And without organizations like Lancaster Farmland Trust and others who are doing that work, it's the potential that this would go away. So I think there's, and farmers are faced with difficult decisions all the time, whether that be to sell the farm or sell the cows or change the operation and those sort of things. But by preserving their farms, they're locking that up in perpetuity. So it's a huge decision and sacrifice on their part. So they should be commended for it as well. But there's not a lot guaranteed in life. But farmland preservation is one of those things that I feel will be around for a long time. So, yeah.
So we really appreciate you coming out here and explaining more about your work and your perspective on change in Lancaster. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
That was really great, yeah.
Yeah. Is that it?
I think so.
Yay! We did it!
Great.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good.
Ooh, that's a wrap.